Hey there, my name's Chris Young, and I wanted to touch base with y'all because I get a lot of questions related to coaching, mentoring, and helping people find jobs in the training and development industry. A lot of the phone calls I get, LinkedIn requests I get are from educators who are looking to move into the training and development space, and I end up having a lot of one-on-one calls with folks, so I figured I would give the highlights of those phone calls in a quick little coaching conversation. And because this is online, if I'm talking too slow, you just check on those settings and speed it up to 2 times, and you'll be done with the video in half the time. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is being focused on training and development in Austin, Texas. So there are a couple of things there. When I talk to people across the country who are thinking about changing careers or changing states, it's usually a lot to handle. So the first thing I always ask folks is, where do you want to live? And then the second question I ask is, what organizations have you already reached out to already? So when it comes to deciding where you want to go, as an educator, maybe leaving the classroom for the first time, you may think to yourself, oh my gosh, I've got the entire world ahead of me. Everybody's working from home, so I could literally apply to any job on the planet and I would be eligible for it. That's both a great option, and it usually leads to analysis paralysis. When you have too many options, then that's almost like having no options at all. So my first recommendation to anybody who's in the job search market or looking to change careers is figure out in time and space where you want to be. This comes up a lot with our veteran population. When they're leaving the service, they don't have to stay where they left the service, and I usually hear veterans say to me, I'll do anything, anywhere. That's not a viable job search strategy, and it is entirely too much for you to pick up on. So of course you're going to talk to your family, your friends, you're going to talk to where the opportunities are, and you're probably going to narrow it down to a short list of places you want to be. And that's a great first step. If you can narrow down to time and space where you want to be, then that's going to make your job search and your transition a heck of a lot easier. So for the points of this conversation, I'm talking about coming to Austin, Texas to be a training and development professional, or leaving the classroom in the Central Texas area and becoming a training and development professional. So that's where we are in time and space. So when I talk about training and development jobs, they really fall into 2 broad categories. The first is the private sector, and the second is the public sector. So let's break that down really easily. The private sector, when you're looking for training and development jobs, you're usually going to find 2 flavors. One, they're both training and development, but one is different than the other. So in the private sector, the training and development jobs, there are some that are very customer facing. These are the folks that work with sales and operations, and when somebody buys a new product, they send them over to the training and development team who gives them technical training on software, service, or whatever it is that company is selling. Those folks usually live in the operations and sales world, and they don't always feel the same way as other training and development jobs. On the other side of the private sector are what we would consider more traditional training and development jobs, where you're training internal staff or you're supporting an HR function, and you're really focused on the folks that are inside the company. You're not externally focusing like the folks that are working in sales and operation. So you're going to find job descriptions that have those 2 different flavors. They're either internally facing with training and development, or they're externally facing with sales and marketing and that sort of thing. The other tier we're going to talk about are public sector jobs. So there's a very large public sector in Central Texas, and it's good to not sleep on those jobs as well. So by the way of comparison, when we look at the largest employers in Central Texas, you're going to find Dell, you're going to find Tesla, you're going to find our grocery market chain, H-E-B, and then you're also going to find the city of Austin, which employs over 20,000 people here in Central Texas. If you weren't looking at the public sector, you might miss those jobs with the city of Austin. Talking about the public sector, we do get a couple of different flavors. So let's not forget that there's the state level, then there's the city level, and then there's county level. There are even federal government jobs that are here in Central Texas. The IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, has a very large hub here in Central Texas, and from time to time they're looking for trainers. The Texas Military Department, which is really a collaboration between the state and the federal level, is always looking for people too. When we're looking at the public sector, you can look at state, you can look at city, you can look at county. Don't forget those things exist. If you've never done it before, if you've never looked at a public sector job, my recommendation in Central Texas is always to go to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission website. The Health and Human Services Commission in Texas is the largest public agency, so they employ over 25,000 people. So if you can get a feel for how they do their hiring, their job postings, and what they're looking for, you should feel comfortable with every other state organization and even other public sector organizations here in Texas. And that brings us to another point. So perhaps you have already looked at public sector jobs in Texas, or you saw a job posting on Indeed or another website, and you went to go apply for that job, and then maybe next week you saw another job at another state agency, and you went to look at that job, and it looked completely different. That's something I want to highlight here. The state of Texas does not have a central administrative body that manages the hiring of all of our separate agencies. It's kind of a normal schema. Depending on which state you go to, they may be completely different. For example, so Texas is big, California is big as well. If you want to apply for a job at Caltrans, the transportation department for California, or you want to apply for a job in their natural resources unit somewhere in California, you go to one website, and it's all based out of Sacramento. So you can apply to 1 million different jobs, 1 million different agencies, all with one website. Texas does not do it that way. All of our agencies have their own independent authority to hire, fire, source, and so every single agency in the state of Texas has a different portal, a different talent acquisition system, and a different way of applying online. So if you're out there and you're thinking there's got to be an easier way to do this in Texas, I'm here to tell you there is not an easier way to do it in Texas. So that brings up two things. That's both a good thing and a bad thing. So the good thing about it is that because it's so disjointed and every agency has the authority to do their own stuff, not everybody's going to dump their resume into every single portal. They're not even going to be able to find every single hiring website that each agency uses. So that means there's going to be less competition. When you compare that to California, if I have one resume and I can apply to 100 different agencies and 1,000 different jobs with a couple of simple clicks, that means I'm going to flood those inboxes in California, and it's going to be harder to stand out amongst others. The converse is true here in Texas. If you can find the hiring portal, if you know what you're looking at and you understand that agency and that job description, the competition is going to be relatively less than in a state that has that central administrative function. So it's both a good and a bad thing. I would always recommend maintaining a spreadsheet so you know where all these portals are when you find them, and that where all these job descriptions live and where everybody can apply at the same place. I also point out that there are a lot of different job descriptions out there. Not everything is classified the same way, and that independence in Texas public agencies translates to job descriptions. So although they track back to a state title and a state job family, they could have a very different name on the job posting. So things like organizational excellence, organizational change management, program managers, program administrators, they may actually track back to a training role, but unless you read the job description and discern what they're looking for, you may completely miss what looks and feels like an 80% training role. So I encourage everybody to really read the job descriptions and look at the core responsibilities. And if you walk away thinking to yourself, this looks a lot like training, education, outreach, communications, that's probably something that you're interested in looking at and even applying to. So that brings us to our next subject of, how to get out there and how to build a network. So networking in Central Texas is no different from anywhere else, but it is localized because certain groups are more popular and more prolific than others. Since you're looking at training and development jobs, the two organizations I always recommend everybody looks out to are the Association for Talent Development, the Austin chapter, and the Austin Human Resource Management Association. So in the training and development world, our sibling is HR, and those internally facing roles usually work pretty close with HR. So you will see a lot of crossover in the talent and development space with the HR space. So I encourage you to reach out to both of them. The Association for Talent Development, the national version of that is our industry group. So if you're getting into the training and development space, you have to know what ATD is nationally, and rest assured that there's a great Central Texas chapter in ATD Austin. They do events, they do in-person events, they do virtual events. They're very cheap to attend. I would always recommend you always reach out and try and go to those events if you can. If you're elsewhere in Texas, there are other chapters. There's one in Dallas-Fort Worth, there's one in Houston. I think there might still be one in El Paso. Those are definitely great metro areas where you can check out and see what those chapters have to offer. Similarly, the national version of an HR industry group is the Society for Human Resource Management, and their local chapter in Austin is the Austin Human Resource Management Association. They do an annual conference. They also are very active. They have monthly meetings, and they have very low price points to show up. I would encourage everybody who's listening to this and looking for a learning and development job in Central Texas to reach out to both of those organizations, AHRMA, AHRMA, and ATD Austin. At least get on their mailing lists. They also have job boards, and anybody on that list is usually a good place to start when it comes to networking on LinkedIn. Those folks will reach out to you, and they will not be, they won't be worried that you're cold calling them. Which kind of takes us to our next step. So we're talking about networking, we're talking about finding a job here in Austin for the training and development space, or the learning and development space, and that probably leads you to conversations about career change. You may be thinking, hey, I'm an educator, I've been teaching in a school district for the last 15 years. This is really a big career change for me to go to the private sector and to help customers learn how to use a piece of technology. Well, I'm here to tell you that's more of a you issue than it is a me issue. As a hiring manager, I know how to read a resume, and I know what an educator's resume looks like, and I know how those skills translate to the private sector, the public sector, to the adult learning environment. I do not need anybody to explain to me, what you've been doing in a classroom. You will on your resume, but I don't need you to cover anything up. I don't need you to change your job titles. I don't need you to do any of that stuff as a hiring manager. I understand that. And from our perspective, we don't look at this as a career change. If you're in the HR world, if you're in the training and development world, your focus is on people and making people get better at what they do. That's the same job description you have as an elementary school teacher. The only difference is the age and our clientele. As a matter of fact, we in the training and development world recognize that formal education stops at a certain age for a lot of people. And although you've seen them and held them for 12 years, I have to deal with them for the rest of their lives. So we're all in the same business, and what you're doing when you decide that you want to leave the classroom is not such a drastic career change from our perspective. I tell everyone that, hey, you had them for 12 years, they threw their hat in the air on a Thursday, and on Monday morning, they're my clients for the rest of their adult lives. So if you're struggling with that, hey, I'm leaving the classroom, I'm leaving my kids behind, I don't want to give this up, well, I'm here to tell you that the learning doesn't stop. And just because they graduated with a diploma on Thursday doesn't mean that I'm not teaching them how to tie their boots on Monday morning, and that I'm not teaching them how to rewrite an email for tone, and doing the same things that you've been working on socially and emotionally for 12 years for the rest of their lives. So if you're struggling with that, I'm here to tell you that we're still in the people development business. The only difference is the clientele. So that's more of a you issue than it is a me issue as a hiring manager. So that kind of takes us to our next subject and our final subject here, which is resumes. So I said earlier, I don't need you to change your job title. You don't need to change from classroom teacher to professional educator. I know what that means. You don't need to change it from teacher to something that looks nice or that ChatGPT told you was a great job title. I don't need that translation exercise. Some managers do, and you may get some benefit from that, but that's kind of a buyer beware situation. Which brings us to kind of the formatting for resumes. Almost everyone in the training and development space, whether you're private sector or public sector, is looking for a temporal resume. They're looking for the years that you worked at places so we can add up the number of years of experience you have. That's very important in the public sector because we can't interview anyone that we don't determine meets the minimum job requirements. And if we can't figure out how many years you were teaching or doing something related to training and development or something related to HR, we can't screen your resume into our pool. There are people out there that will tell you a functional resume is better, where you just talk about your skills, you maybe talk about the organization, but you leave the years off. I'm going to tell you, that doesn't work for a majority of the jobs that are out there, and it doesn't work for public sector jobs. So if you do have a functional resume, I would highly recommend you look at that again and consider a temporal format as well. When talking about resumes, and certainly brevity is the spice of life here. We want to get to the bottom line as quickly as possible. The resume's only purpose is to secure you an interview. It's not supposed to sell us on everything there is to know about you. That's why we do a personal interview. So you're only looking to make sure it has the years of experience, the required education, maybe the optional stuff that they're looking for, and that everything that's on your resume responds directly to the job responsibilities. To do that, we recommend the STAR format: the situation, the task, the activities, and the results. If your bullet for everything that you're doing can tell a little story like that addresses the STAR format, those are solid bullets. And we'll want those underneath every single specific position you've had in your past that are relevant to your experience. When it comes to writing a resume, you've probably already got a solid resume right now. If you do not, and you're thinking, hey, I need somebody really professional to look at this, my only advice to everybody out there is, again, caveat emptor, buyer beware. I would not recommend using a resume service unless it was someone you knew personally. So that goes back to our networking, reaching out to our HR contacts and our training and development contacts. Now you have something to talk about when you go to one of their meetings and you say, hey, can you recommend a good resume writer who's worked for you or somebody you know? That's a question you could ask anybody, breaks the ice with all those folks, and it may get you what you need if you need to have a professional look at your resume and rewrite it for you. So I hope I've given you a lot to look at, a lot to think about, a lot to chew on. I'll try and put links in here. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn if you find me here. But this is what I usually provide when somebody calls me and says, hey, I'm thinking about a career in training and development. Can I put 30 minutes on the clock with you? They get this video. So now you've got it, and if you've played it at 2 times speed on YouTube, then you've got it in half the time as everybody else. I certainly thank you for listening to me, and with that, I'll wish you good luck in your job search. Thanks.